Well, I had big trouble getting this oil ring in. The first two were no sweat. This one was a little tough, and this one was impossible. I would get it in there correctly, let go, and it would snap and just overlap. And I spent, 12 hours repeatedly trying to get it to stay in place, and it just wouldn't do it. I looked under the microscope, and I think I saw the issue. They take this expander ring and they cut it, and the ends weren't cut in the same spot. So one end was like here and the other end was here. So as soon as you put any pressure on it, they just snap. It just snaps and goes under, and this one pops over. Every time it was red over green. It never was green over red. So I filed it a little bit to try and make the edges vertical, and it didn't really help. I finally called the piston ring manufacturer, and he said, I asked him if I could bend this more straight up and maybe bend this one a little more straight up, and he said, yeah, that's fine. So I did that, and it immediately went together with no issue. So I've never had that happen before, but if you have that trouble, maybe there's a solution. And another problem, I had the timing gear on, and I lined up the gear face to the timing gear face. There's not supposed to be any gap. I ended up taking out 15 mils of shim behind this crank timing gear to try to get them in the same plane, and it still wasn't good enough. I looked at the timing chain, and there's so much slop. I thought, well, it's okay because the timing chain isn't that particular about it. I took off the timing gear, and I noticed that there's a ping here, and it's mushroomed, cratered, and there's a ridge up there. I don't know who would put a ping there, but anyway, now that I have it in the block, I get to try to grind that off and get all the shavings into the cylinder or engine block. Okay, never mind. They pinged it through the hole. So even though there was a ridge there that I ground off, it wasn't making any difference. So I'm about 6 mil feeler gauge goes through here when I put a straight edge across there or across this way. And I have no shim back here, so the only thing I could do would be to have the back of this crank timing gear milled off. But like I say, the timing gear's got so much slop in it, I just don't believe this is going to be an issue. Okay, here's my setup for degreeing the cam. I just put a little piece of plywood here, traced it with an old head gasket, and put holes for the push rod tubes. And I can get top dead center, and I can get the valve lift. And got my nice paper degree wheel with a magnet holding it on and a little wire. But it works pretty well. You just have to be careful not to bump anything. Got it all done yesterday, and it turned out I had used the exhaust valve instead of the intake valve here, so got to do it again. But I think I have it just perfect now. It's maybe a 1/4 degree off, and the smallest adjustment is a little over a degree. Well, I had this degreed in perfectly, and then I decided to check the exhaust valve, and it's off 4 degrees. And so I thought, God, I sent the cam in for a regrind, and could they have really screwed it up that much? And I called them, and they said, no, not possible. And I measured again. I got the same answer. And then I looked in the book, and it turns out for the TR4A, which is what I have, or at least thought I had, for an engine, those are the specs on the valves. But for the TR2, there's 2 degrees difference on each one for a total of 4. So I think somebody stuck a TR3 CAM in my TR4 block. And the block's probably the same, but I did measure the old piston, and it is an 86 millimeter piston, which is correct for a TR4. So not exactly sure how I got to this point or how the engine got to this point, but it looks like I'm going to just live with the TR3 CAM, even though it's not quite as good. It's too much time to try and do anything else, I think, at this point. So I get to degree it one more time. have the new fancy variable wheel attached and have the valve timing set as perfectly as I can tell with my measurements. And so finally I can move forward after weeks of screwing around with piston rings and timing gears. So I think I'm going to try something different. I'm going to put the pistons in the jugs and take them all out, then put the gaskets in and set them all down so I don't have to worry about hitting another snag along the way. So I don't have a gasket under this one now. I'm going to take it out with the piston and see if I can do that with all 4 of them. All the pistons are in the cylinders now, and I cleaned as best I could all the surfaces where the gasket is going to go with grease remover. Also cleaned out the holes where they meet up, and I think I'm going to spray the head gasket with some copper spray and get that ready and put it together. Right, I like that method of installing the jugs and pistons together. You can do 1 and 4 at the same time, and 2 and 3. I did number 1 first. Wasn't sure if I could do 4, so I turned the engine over to put the rod on, and of course the gasket, figure 8 gasket on this side fell out, so I had to clean that all off. Don't forget about putting that in after, or doing 1 and 4 together so that gasket doesn't fall out. But now I'm starting to put the head studs in.